All right. So this will be a reiteration of what Alex said, which is funny because we didn't talk before. So hopefully it'll really stick to our minds. A little bit of repetition. But the question of the week this week is question 785. And question 785 is under the moral laws part of the Spirit's book. It's on the chapter of Law of Progress, and it's on the section of March of Progress. So the question is, what is the greatest obstacle to progress? And the answer is pretty long, but mainly is the very two words there, or three, pride and selfishness, is really what we have to focus on. And then the rest of that, talks a lot about progress, moral and intellectual progress. And the specific answer, pride and selfishness, is mainly an obstacle to our moral progress, right? So obviously that's kind of what the spirits are telling us. But going back to the moral and intellectual progress, they go hand in hand. So we need both of them in order to make sure that we are getting closer to God and progressing, right? And then one thing, that I learned by reading a little bit more of the chapter was that progress is inevitable. It's something that is so natural within us. So it's innate within us, and we're always working towards progress, both morally and intellectual. And the one thing that I learned today from Alex, which was great, was that if we are stopping, if we're not going with that progress, then we are committing moral suicide. So thank you, Alex, for that. So as long as we are going towards our Heavenly Father, towards Jesus, and following Jesus' teachings, we are definitely getting happiness and pursuing true happiness. So the interesting thing that the rest of the detail of the question tells us is that intellectual and moral progress, they're not linear, right? So even though they do go together, it's not really a linear relationship. So moral progress is a consequence of intellectual progress. Intellectual progress will lead moral progress by helping us understand what's right from wrong. So then when we understand what's right from wrong, then we have ability to make choices, and then that's when we have free will. And then that really differentiates us from many organic beings, so organic beings here, right? So if we're talking about animals, and animals don't have the same free will that we do, so they don't have that ability to make that many choices. So when we have that free will, we have the ability, enough intellectual progress that we can keep on progressing morally. And the way that we can try to differentiate, because it can get a little bit complicated sometimes, but if we think about that serenity prayer, has everybody heard of the serenity prayer? Right, so I, just thinking about it, I thought that was a very simple way of explaining the difference between intellectual and moral progress. So I'll read the serenity prayer, and maybe you guys will kind of click for you too. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and wisdom to know the difference. So wisdom is that intellectual part, right? And then the courage and the serenity is more of that moral choice that we can make for ourselves. So then going back to pride. So pride and selfishness prevent us from making the right choice towards our moral development. So obviously, committing that moral suicide if we keep on the pride and the selfishness. So pride is the overestimation of our beliefs and our values. So what Alex said too, mentioned pride is really thinking that we're right all the time, right? Not really thinking that we're correct and that others don't really have the time of day. But then pride is really, really bad, because if you think that you're right all the time, then what is there for you to work on? So how can you progress morally if you don't know what your faults are, what your vices are, so that you can work on those and improving those? And then selfishness is a big problem too, because you're only thinking of yourself, and you're only thinking of your needs, and you forget what others' needs are. So what our neighbors' needs are. Then, as we the spirits also tell us a little bit later in the spirits book, they tell us that selfishness is the root of all evil. Because again, we're really just thinking of ourselves. We forget about our neighbor, and it just really builds up all of our vices. We know from our intellectual side that if we cure the root cause of our vices, then we may improve ourselves, and if we kill the root cause, then we can cure ourselves. So the way that the gospel tells us that we can improve ourselves, so again, maybe try to diminish our pride and our selfishness, is through charity and humility. So humility is the very opposite of pride, right? So humility is the forgetting or realizing that we're not perfect, and Alex also mentioned that. So we're not all perfect. We all have faults and vices. So when you take that veil out, that mask out, and you realize your problems, then you can actually work on them and try to modify them and try to grow from that, learn from your mistakes, and actually accept others too, right? So if we all accept that we're all not perfect, we're a little bit more understanding towards the person that's with us, that's close to us. So again, being humble is not just, if you look in the dictionary, it's more like being modest, or being respectful. So again, more think of it towards accepting yourself and accepting others. And that's a great way to combat pride. Now, charity is the opposite of selfishness, and Alex also talked about that. So it's benevolence, indulgence, and forgiveness. So again, a great way to forget ourselves and really follow the teachings of Jesus, which is love one another. So think of our neighbor as well. And in fact, the gospel tells us that humility and charity are the two things that Jesus never ceased to recommend. And they're definitely the very opposite of pride and selfishness. So finally, the Spirit's book kind of ends, the selfishness part with selfishness is the source of all vices. Charity is the source of all of our virtues. So if we just have those two things, if we can try to get those two things, and I know it's hard, but if we keep thinking about it, we have to destroy pride or selfishness, and we have to build and develop our charity, right? So our love for one another. Then if we make that the goal of our incarnation, not only our incarnation, but also of our future incarnations, we will truly get happiness in the present and in the future. So hopefully that was helpful. Thank you.